Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely crucial for historic property owners: water damage in Wilkinsburg. And more importantly, the actual science behind restoration. It's a fascinating process, so let's jump right into it.
So think about this for a second. What is really hiding inside the walls of Wilkinsburg's oldest homes? I mean, when you walk down the gorgeous streets of Regent Square or along the Penn Avenue corridor, you see this stunning early 20th century architecture. It's beautiful, right? But right behind that drywall and plaster, there are invisible, rapidly spreading dangers literally just waiting for the perfect conditions to strike. Because water, it doesn't just sit there. It travels, it climbs, and it destroys. And to understand exactly why this specific area is essentially a perfect storm for this kind of destruction, we really need to look at the unique anatomy of these properties.
Okay, so Wilkinsburg has this incredible housing stock dating back to the early 1900s. But, that charm comes with some seriously aging infrastructure. A lot of these homes still have their original cast iron drain lines and galvanized supply pipes. And when you factor in Allegheny County's brutal freeze-thaw cycles, those pipes are highly prone to winter cracking. But actually, it gets worse. A lot of these older structures use what's called balloon frame construction. Basically, this means there are continuous open wall cavities running straight from the foundation all the way up to the attic. It's wild. So when a pipe bursts, the water uses these cavities like a massive superhighway, traveling incredibly fast before the homeowner even notices a single drop. Add to that the steep pitched roofs that tend to form really destructive winter ice dams, which pushes water right under the shingles, and the heavy, clay-rich soil near 9 Mile Run that forces spring runoff straight into aging foundations. Well, it's pretty much a geographic and architectural recipe for disaster.
60 minutes. When that perfect storm finally hits, that is your standard professional response window. Every single minute counts when water is spreading through one of those balloon frame homes we just talked about. If technicians can arrive within an hour, they can deploy truck-mounted extraction units capable of pumping out thousands of gallons per hour. It's a rapid deployment, and the whole point is to completely halt that aggressive spread of water before it can migrate into unaffected rooms. Because at this stage, you aren't just fighting water, you are literally fighting time.
But the clock obviously doesn't stop at 60 minutes. Fast forward to the 48-hour mark. This is the ticking clock of secondary damage. If hidden moisture is ignored, it only takes about 24 to 48 hours for hazardous, toxic mold to start growing inside those historic walls. And it doesn't stop there. Prolonged moisture causes structural wood rot, the warping of those beautiful original hardwood floors, and the complete degradation of drywall and plaster. So delaying action doesn't just mean things stay wet a little longer. It means you're kicking off a cascading chain reaction of biological and structural failure.
So how do you actually find all this hidden water? Well, spoiler alert, just coking at a wet ceiling stain isn't going to cut it. Relying on a visual inspection means you're going to completely miss the hidden moisture trapped in subfloors and deep inside wall cavities. Professional restoration relies on some pretty advanced moisture detection tech. We're talking thermal imaging cameras that spot temperature differentials, which indicate hidden pools of water behind surfaces. Plus, they use penetrating moisture meters and hygrometers to map out the full extent of the damage, completely avoiding the need to unnecessarily tear open walls. This tech effectively maps the entire battlefield, so absolutely nothing gets overlooked.
Now, recovering a compromised building isn't just some chaotic rush to mop things up. It's actually a rigorous three-phase restoration process. Phase 1 is emergency mitigation, Phase 2 is structural drying, and Phase 3 is restoration and rebuild. Let's break down exactly how that kicks off.
Phase 1 is all about stabilizing the patient, so to speak. Day 1 focuses entirely on stopping the source of the water, assuming it hasn't been shut off already. Once that's done, the heavy machinery comes in to extract all the standing water. But it's not just about removal, it's heavily focused on protection. Technicians rush to move furniture, secure valuables, and set up containment barriers. Sometimes they even utilize negative air pressure chambers. Why? To prevent cross-contamination and absolutely stop the moisture from migrating into the dry, unaffected areas of the home. This phase is intense, it's fast-paced, and it is entirely about damage control.
And that stabilization perfectly paves the way for Phase 2, structural drying. This is where we need to demystify the process a bit, because drying a building, it is definitely not just pointing a few box fans at a wet floor and hoping for the best. It actually relies on a field of physics called psychrometrics. This is the literal science of how air and moisture interact. Professionals calculate things like green depression and vapor pressure. They use these exact mathematical calculations to figure out precisely how many commercial air movers and refrigerant dehumidifiers they need and exactly where to place them in the room to perfectly manipulate the airflow and humidity. It is a highly calculated, exact science. But, before they can even decide how to dry, they have to consult the standards. The IICRC S500 standards classify the water itself, which is super important, because the source of the water completely dictates the strict safety and sanitization protocols they have to use. For example, Category 1 is clean water, think a burst galvanized supply pipe. Category 2 is gray water, maybe from a washing machine overflow, so it carries moderate contamination. And then there's Category 3. This is black water, like a sewage backup or storm flooding that carries groundwater into a basement. Category 3 contains extremely harmful bacteria and pathogens, which demands specialized protective equipment, intense chemical sanitization, and honestly, the immediate removal of any porous materials, because they simply cannot be saved.
Now, alongside the water category, the pros also have to classify the wet materials themselves based on permeability. Class 1 materials are minimally porous, so they dry the fastest. Think things like tile or concrete. Class 2 involves significant wet carpet and padding. Class 3 means overhead water has completely saturated walls and ceilings, which, as we mentioned earlier, is really typical in balloon frame homes when a second-floor pipe bursts. Finally, we have Class 4. This involves materials with very low permeability. We're talking Wilkinsburg's beautiful original hardwood floors and historic plaster walls. Class 4 requires highly specialized drying equipment and sets realistic drying timeframes of 3 to 5 days, sometimes even longer. And here's the thing, you literally cannot accelerate drying beyond what physics allows without risking severe long-term damage.
And all of this leads us to what might be the most critical rule in the entire restoration process: verifying the dry. You never, ever remove equipment based on a guess or just because a surface feels dry to the touch. That's a huge mistake. Technicians have to return to the property daily to take precise moisture meter readings from the affected materials. They track this data incredibly rigorously. Reconstruction should never begin until these daily readings definitively prove that the internal structure meets acceptable industry-standard dryness levels. Because trapped moisture, that is a ticking time bomb for future mold outbreaks, and hard data is the only way to diffuse it.
Okay, so once the dry is totally verified, we finally get to enter Phase 3, restoration and rebuild. This is the stage where the disaster is, for all intents and purposes, erased. Reconstruction crews come in to repair or replace the damaged drywall, install new flooring, and perfectly match the existing paint and finishes. The ultimate goal here is returning the property right back to its pre-loss condition, making it look like the disaster never even happened in the first place, all while ensuring that every single new installation strictly follows modern local building codes to better protect the property down the road. Of course, let's be real, none of this happens in a vacuum. For most property owners, dealing with water damage means you're going to be dealing with insurance. The crucial takeaway here is that professional restoration creates a bulletproof paper trail. Insurance adjusters require a lot: detailed photographic evidence of the pre-loss condition, those daily moisture reading logs we talked about that prove the structural drawing was actually effective, and a highly comprehensive scope of work reports. The pros also use Xactimate, which is the industry-standard software for generating estimates. Providing this level of thorough documentation ensures that claims are processed smoothly, without endless disputes, letting the homeowner just focus on getting their life back to normal rather than fighting over paperwork. Every hour of delay increases damage and restoration costs. Remember, water damage is not just some static event that happens and stops. It is an active, aggressive process that continues to degrade your property second by second. Delaying action is inevitably going to lead to those devastating secondary issues we covered, like toxic mold and structural failure, turning what could have been a manageable cleanup into a massive, wildly expensive rebuild. So I'll leave you with this final thought. If a pipe cracked behind your walls right this very second, would your first reaction be to grab a mop or to call in the science to stop the clock? Thanks for joining me today, and keep learning.